help from obscure places like the Rubber Bandits, who have 80,000 people following them on Twitter. It's amazing, they are politically more important for the ordinary people now than the Labour Party. And that is a fact, because this had been put out there before about the reading room, but a little bit of luck, and as a result of it, people are talking about it. And another bit of luck was, for me and for people in Ireland, was that the Greenpeace leaks came out around the same time. Actually, there were people suggesting that I leaked them. I didn't. It was just luck. But you need a bit of luck at times when you're fighting the type of people you're fighting, because they think about this all the time. It is their job to think about, how do we get this through? Where it is your job to get up in the morning, take care of your kids, and do everything you have to do in your life. And then if you get a bit of spare time, you try and fight this. So we need a bit of luck, and we've got a bit of luck. People are now listening. Now, Joan mentioned when was the first time she heard about TTIP. You know, it's the Transatlantic Trade Investment Partnership. The first time I heard about it was, I was sitting down in the Dáil beside Mick Wallace and Claire Daly. You've probably heard of them. And Mick Wallace wasn't concentrating on what Eddie Kenny was saying, good move. And basically he had the Guardian there, and he was reading an article by George Monbiot, which you probably all have heard of at this stage, and he was going on about TTIP. And I was like, what's TTIP about? And Mick Wallace says to me, he says, I heard you were thinking of running the European elections. You want to find out, and you want to make it an issue, and you want to bring it up. And as it turns out, it is probably the biggest issue going out there at this stage. In fact, it is the biggest issue, unless you consider the possibility the European Union will fall apart, and then the agreement can't happen. That would potentially be a bigger issue, but it is the big issue. And basically, what MEPs can do about it, and what we have been doing about it, is there have been initiatives in the Parliament to try and encourage the Commission to be more open about it. About a year and a half ago, there was a report put to the Parliament, and what the group I'm a member of tried to do was, we tried to have an amendment inserted into it. First of all, that the whole negotiations be stopped. And we didn't vote for that, predictably enough. The next thing we tried to have put into it was that the dispute mechanism, the ISDS, would be removed. We didn't succeed on that. And I say but, careful but, because this is only a twist to try and pull the wool over your eyes. There was a change to, in a sense, to the ISDS system. They moved towards an investment court system, but in the same way as they changed the name of Windscale to Sellafield, you still have to live beside it, and it's still as dangerous as ever. It's just got a different name, and that is kind of what the MEPs had achieved. Now, I'm not trying to put myself down, I'm an MEP, but the group that I'm a member of, we have gung-ho fought against this. And there are people in my group who know more about this than me, were on the road longer on it than me, and a guy called Schultz, he is our rapporteur on it, and he has taken the complete lead on it. But unfortunately, the other groups, the EPP, which Fine Gael are a member of, and the SD, or the Progressives as they call themselves, I don't know why, which the Labour Party were connected with, they are pretty much in favour of it. But the spin is that they have achieved change, but in fact they have not achieved a change at all. What we've ended up with is just a different type of dispute mechanism. And why would we want this anyway, is the question. And every politician, because politicians have to be careful, you can all lynch us after we say something, you mightn't agree with us, and we've got to apparently talk about things in a way that don't scare you. So I'll start off like every other politician. I'm for trade, just in case you thought I wasn't. And that's what every politician feels they have to say. It's like every morning before you get up telling your wife, I'm all for air, just in case you didn't know. That's the bleeding obvious. What we need to discuss is what type of trade and how we do our trade. Is the trade for the benefit of multinationals, or is it ultimately for the betterment of the ordinary people? And when people say to me, are you against trade? I say no, of course I'm not against trade, but I'm against the wrong type of trade. I'm against the type of trade that ruins the planet. I'm against the type of trade that Phil Hogan was talking about when he was trying to please one of his friends from Poland at the Agriculture Committee last week, where he said, don't worry. He said, if I get my way, I'll have your apples and pears on sale in the United States of America. And if I have my way, I'll have your apples and pears on sale in Japan. And the sentence previous to that, Phil Hogan had said, I am committed to climate change. He's obviously committed to changing the climate if he wants to bring apples and pears from Poland to Japan. People in Japan can grow their own apples and pears. People in California can grow their own apples and pears. And that might sound like, sure, that's a daft thing to be doing. But at a high-level meeting, that's what they call them, at the Agriculture Committee in the European Parliament, when pushed, the Commission said, as their best foot forward, why would you want this, to a Spanish MEP from Podemos? Well, you see, dear, he said, you will be able to sell your oranges in California, and they'll be able to sell them in Spain. Now, that does not make sense. TTIP can be made sound very technical by people at times, and it can get a little bogged down to the point that people glaze over. But let's keep it simple. What is the sense of beef, orange and apples passing each other on the high seas in the name of trade? Are we not more intelligent than that we can stop that? But they will tell you, okay, fine, if you don't agree with that, you love jobs. This is about jobs. And if you're against TTIP, you're against creating jobs. Well, that's not true either. Now, if you have to tell a lie about something, and you have to keep telling that lie, obviously, it isn't a very good story that you have to tell. And Richard Bruton has been going around telling people that there is a report out there from the European Commission, I'm sure you'd have to believe that in the best case scenario, if TTIP goes through, you will see a 0.48% growth in GDP above and beyond what we would now expect. And he has said it on numerous occasions. And then I got an invite to breakfast with Richard Bruton, and I get invites to regular breakfasts over in Brussels. And for the first while, and maybe I wasn't doing my job properly, but there's a mischievous part of me that emailed them all back going, I would have had me breakfast already. Why am I going for breakfast with you? I just prefer a meeting. So we went for a breakfast. And all the Fine Gael MEPs were there, and there was a variety of different types of croissants, etc. And we all mingled and we chatted. And I'm not good at that, to be quite honest, because I talk about nothing else but politics and small talk. I'd end up having a row with them, so I just stood back and I said I'd hold my fire. So we sat down, and Richard Bruton, he started talking about this report that says we're going to see 0.48% growth above and beyond what we're expecting. Now, even if that was correct, with changes in currency and a variety of different things can happen in the world economy, how do you prove it happened like that anyways? So I said to Richard, I recorded him by the way, I have a habit of doing that, and fair dues to Mr. McCabe, he proved it's right. When you deal with the authorities in Ireland, you do record them, and tough luck if they don't like it. They're a pack of liars. And I asked him the killer question, what sort of extra growth can we expect? And as sure as hell he said, well, we can expect 0.48%. And then I said to him, is that over 1 year or over 10 years? Now, by the way, the report said over 10 years, best case scenario. And he said, no, that's over 1 year. And I said, are you sure that it is over 1 year? Oh, I'm definite. I said, fine, that's great. Really, that's all I came for. But the news is, Richard, it's actually over 10 years. Do you still agree with it? He looked at his officials, or as we call the people who sit beside Andy Kenny, his outboard brain, and they told him, well, actually it is over 10 years. So the best foot forward is this: if everything goes right, and if there's no downside for us or anything like that, never mind about your freedom or your right to decide anything in the future. Forget about all that. Let's say you don't care about that. You are, according to them, best case scenario, looking at less than 1/20% extra growth every year. And that's where you start working it out using compound interest. We use simple interest for Richard. And I think the best way it was put was by John Hillary. And he said from War on Want, you probably read about him if you're following this topic. It's a brilliant resource. Look up War on Want. He said at a GUI meeting that if everything goes perfect and everything goes the way they predicted, you will all have an extra cup of coffee every week. That's what you're going to gain, a cup of coffee. But what do you lose? You lose the right to regulate food standards in the future. You lose the right to have a say. Now, if you think that's a good thing, fine, go along with it. Now, the thing about jobs, this would create jobs. We were told it would create jobs. Well, the North Atlantic Free Trade Agreement between the United States of America and Mexico and other countries, the big push on that one was, if we go ahead with this, we create loads of jobs. Well, has it created loads of jobs? Well, according to some people's estimates, it's cost up to 1 million jobs. Some people would suggest more, some people would suggest 600,000 jobs. But either way, it didn't work out too well. So the people who are telling us now, because look, everyone wants a job, everyone wants a good living, and they're obviously trying to appeal to you. So if they're saying, you know, believable people like Brian Hayes, if they're saying that it's going to create jobs, well, then people are going to go, well, I want jobs, and you know, life is tough, and maybe we might have to trade off a few things for that. Well, it's not even going to create jobs. So what the hell are we at? What is the point in it? And really the point in it is, as I said earlier, it's about multinationals. It's about lowering standards. It's about creating a situation where when the United States trades with us here, in order for us to be on an equal footing with them, we'll want to have no holidays, because how can you compete with a company in America that you get people to work around the clock, and okay, legally in one case, get them to wear nappies while they work at a chicken factory. No one is doing anything about it. Someone came back to me on Facebook and said, but that's illegal in the States. It's illegal, but it's still happening, and that's what people who rear chickens in Cavan will have to do to compete, and that is not on. Because how else will they compete? Is someone who walks into a supermarket who, because of austerity and doesn't have a red cent in their pocket, and they are running around, like flying around like a blue ass fly because to try and collect the kids, etc. They're not going to have the time to delve into weather. Someone actually had to wear a diaper in order to produce that cheaply enough. That's what we're going to have to do to compete with them. Then our farmers, what are they going to have to do? How on earth are you going to compete with beef that has hormones in it? Beef that grows quicker? How are you going to compete? You're not going to be able to compete, and what you're going to have to do is, you're going to have to go to the same standards. Now, what we are told is that the standards will be harmonised. And what myself and Diarmuid O'Flynn, who works with me, he covers TTIP with me in the Parliament, what we have been trying to get the Commission to answer is this: if you're going to harmonise standards, we want to guarantee that in all cases that it is harmonised up. And when I say harmonised up, we're not the saints here either. In the United States of America, believe it or not, it doesn't say much, but they have in some areas on financial services, they have higher standards that we should actually go to. And in the cases of local procurement, as in if they want to invest in an area and they want to create employment in an area and the contract goes locally, it's not illegal. What the European Union wants to do is they want to go by our rules here, which means that, great news, they want to build something along for people along for going great, it'll work at last. And then you discover that you have people from Northern Ireland who are getting absolute rubbish pay, who are being exploited, who basically have to work for half nothing, do the job, and all the money is taken out of the area. The European Union wants the United States, which you could classify as the evil United States. Well, guess what? We want them to bend the knee to us on that. So when it comes to this, what do you want? Because it's always thrown, oh, what do you want? You're always complaining. What I want is better standards all around. I want the standards harmonised up. Now, on the whole issue of secrecy, no one is going to convince me of this idea that this has to be done in secret. But let's say you went along with them and you said, okay, fine, you have to do it in secret. As long as you stick to the red lines, as long as we know we have parameters, such as when we're dealing with the US, we do not take GM foods. That's it, that's the deal. And the red line on food is we don't take hormone-treated beef in return for Volkswagen able to sell more cars in the United States of America. Okay, secret as long as we have red lines. Well, guess what? The secret agreement that they told us has to be secret, and we will give you parameters. As it turns out, as revealed by the Greenpeace leaks, there are no red lines. Now, the cutback from the European Union is, yeah, but we didn't agree to go with it. If you have red lines and you go to a negotiation meeting, and at the start of the meeting, someone has crossed the red lines, you walk out because they've crossed the red line, and you make it clear you don't deal with them. And that's as simple as that. And that's the reason why it's got to be open, because they've proved they cannot be trusted. Now, on the whole idea of openness, we have a man called Bernd Lang, nothing to Bernard Langer, and as someone said about his name, they suggested other names he should have after all the information came out about how he was the MEP who was responsible for, I quote you, his words in an email to me, the great achievement of getting the reading room. Now, I don't hate Bernd Lang, I don't despise Bernd Lang, I actually feel sorry for him, and I really do feel sorry for him, because that is the level of expectation. Bernd Lang, who, if you look at his record, he's actually got a quite good record in different areas in the European Parliament. He is into social justice, you would say, but on this one, they started off, I think it was expectation management, but they said to the MEPs, you're not allowed to see anything. And they said, we'll let the MEPs now fight, and they'll get something. Guess what? Bernd Lang fought for it, and his great achievement was that MEPs can now go in and see the consolidated text. Now, what are the consolidated texts? Now, you might say, I should know exactly what they are. Since I went into that reading room, and knowing I'd be coming talking to people, to talk to people like he, I have been trying to find out definitively what the perfect description for consolidated texts are. But I'll give you my closest idea. We've had 13 rounds of talks, and at the end of the talks, the texts are put together in consolidated texts, and from the 6th one onwards, we were allowed to get access to it, to the reading room. So what you do as an MEP is you register, you get a time slot, and you basically make your way to the reading room, you meet your minder, and you basically you are asked, do you have any recording device on you? Do you have any pens that aren't official European Parliament pens, to do a camera pen, or something like that? You have to put it in a safe, lock it, be out of your reach, and you go into this reading room and you get to see the consolidated text. And anyone who's seen that video will see that it's very like Get Smart or something out of James Bond for people who aren't that old. And you get to see the consolidated text. Now, I was under the impression initially that the consolidated text was everything pretty much that they negotiate. Now, obviously I want to find out how much of it is in that room. No one has been able to tell us, and we have written hundreds of emails trying to find out, and no one seems to be able to tell us. The expert in our group doesn't seem to be able to tell us. But the long and the short of it is, whatever percentage of what was agreed in there is in there, I cannot bring it out to you word for word. Flawed and all as it was, I thought, okay, they're slowing me down, I can only use a pen and paper, I can't photocopy it, I can't take a photograph of it, but at least I can go in and I get 2 hours and I keep writing like hell and I get as much down and then I bring it out and I give it to you and see what you can make of it. Now remember, before I went in I was warned that even if you do bring it out, it's a lot of gobbledygook, it doesn't necessarily mean anything to the general public. Well, when I arrived in there, I was told that I wasn't even allowed to write it down verbatim and bring it out. So I asked the question, is that 2 words, 3 words, 1,000 words? How long is this piece of string? And the poor lady was in there with me. I felt sorry for her because she was set up to do this job. And she played along with it and she told me that she didn't really know. So I said, I better come out, and Jeremy was outside. I explained that basically I wasn't allowed to take it down verbatim and I would be going back again. So in a couple of weeks' time I'm going back again, I'm going to take it word for word and I'm going to give it to the general public. But what that will mean is, as I explained in the video, it's a bit like how the mafia works. It's kind of like they've got my kids. If I release it, no other MEP is ever allowed to look at this information ever again. That is the threat. They'll all be banned. And in a way, it's kind of like, it's really dirty tactics. I suppose the theory is none of the MEPs will ever talk to me anymore. But that is the thinking. I suppose you'd like the idea that you could work with people in the future. But there was an error, even people in my own group were saying, oh, but we can go in and we can see it. And I'm like, going, that's not good enough. We all want to be able to see them. Everyone wants to be able to see them. But we're not. We're not allowed. And that's got to change. Now, on the whole idea of it being secret, and it having to be secret, because in negotiations, some things have to be secret. This is the biggest negotiation and the most important negotiation of all time. Why does it have to be in secret? Why can't it be 20 MEPs, 30 MEPs, or even 50 MEPs from the European Union, and 50 members of the Senate or the House of Representatives? And we sit down and we openly negotiate this. And we negotiate agreement if we want an agreement that means that we don't have beef passing by itself on the high seas. And we come up with an agreement that actually makes it sustainable to live on this planet, so that we'll actually be around to have an economy in the future and to have a planet in the future. Now, I suppose the question is, how do we stop this? Well, as Joan said a year ago, or even less than a year ago, the general public were for this. Now, I don't know how they were for it, because they didn't know anything about it. They couldn't know anything about it. Sure, no one told them about it. But in theory, the general public were for it. 69, it's the 69% of the Irish public, according to the European movement, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil combined in the European movement in reality. 69% of the Irish public were in favour of TTIP, according to this study. Now, I'm working in politics. I would say I'd be lucky if 10% of the people I worked with knew anything about it. Let alone the general public. That's not to insult the general public. But to say they were in favour of it was a lie. And they're not in favour of it. And when I put out the information on the Irish Cancer Society, it came back, Sean Kelly tweeted and said, but the majority of people are in favour of it. So what's the problem? Well, the good news is there's no survey for Ireland yet, but in Germany up on 80% are against it, in France vast majority are against it, in northern Belgium the vast majority are against it, all politicians are against it. And we're still for it for some reason. Brian Hayes is still for it. And the reason why is because they think like we are the next state, the newest state in the United States of America, and they actually do think like that. And they talk about, as Brian Hayes said to me on the radio, well, Luke Flanagan is against it. He's there with Marine Le Pen, he's there with everyone he could think of that he knew I would like to be associated with. But what he forgot was that people in the EPP, in his own party, are against it out of the European Parliament. People who represent the agriculture community are against it. And many people who apparently are meant to be on his political side are against it. All the people from Northern Italy in his party are against it. Francois Hollande, he ain't no socialist, he claims to be one, but you'd do well and you'd struggle to say he was a right-wing extremist. He's against it. So the idea that you'd be put in a corner, as Dan O'Brien tried to do when he said it was just nutters basically who were against it, that isn't true. There is a majority of people against it. So what do we have to do? We've got to make that happen in Ireland. They've done it in Clare, and what we've got to do is, council by council, we've got to get them against TTIP. And it is possible to do it that way. Now, will we get a chance in our Parliament, in the Dáil, to do something about it? No more than what's in the consolidated text. Will we get to vote on it? Will our Parliament get to vote on it? You talk to one person and they say, yeah, it's a mixed agreement, and we will get to vote on it. You talk to people in the Commission, they say, we're not sure. Well, the time of reckoning is coming. You want to make up our mind, because we'd like to know, because if we know, then we can work on changing the minds and bending the minds of the people that we need to. And I suspect it's deliberate, because the less time you have to change their minds and the less time you have to put pressure on, well, the more difficult it's going to be. So the way we're going to stop it is you make it impossible for politicians to go with it. I will, in rural Ireland, have an easier job. Not that it's any worse for people in rural Ireland, but I believe I will, because organisations that I don't like, but they've a lot of pull in rural Ireland, like the IFA, it's starting to come to the point where even that lot are finding it difficult to support it, because it became quite clear in the leaks that agriculture will be traded off and rubbish food will be traded off for other stuff. But they will be playing on the emotions of people who rely on working in Intel and working multinational companies around here. But don't believe them. Because, as I've said, the same thing was said about the North Atlantic Free Trade Agreement, and it didn't come true. In fact, the opposite happened. There was less jobs, and there will be less jobs, because we cannot compete with the United States of America. I don't want us to compete with the United States of America. I don't want that model where no one gets holidays, and people, unfortunately, don't have a life. The American dream has turned into a nightmare. As Catherine Murphy's daughter, actually, she put it very well on Twitter, she said, it's bad enough to destroy their own country. Now they want to destroy the European Union too. And I think it was a very, very good point, because that is basically what it's about. It's not about trade, it's about lowering standards, and it's about making it easier for big people to make money. And as Diarmuid O'Flynn says to me about this dispute settlement mechanism, if the companies that are already trading in this country, if they want a different type of court to do more trade with us, what sort of dirty trade are they going to do? What sort of poisonous trade are they going to do? Environmentally harmful trade are they going to do? And then people will say back to you, oh, but ISDS has been there with countries for years. Yeah, fine. With countries that didn't have stable legal systems. With countries which you could argue were legally backward. Now, our legal system is flawed, but it stands up in many senses. Why should we have a new one, especially for the companies? And we shouldn't have that. And finally, there's a thing called regulatory cooperation. It's very, very important, because you have people like Alan Hughes, who said it on prime time, and you have people from IBAC who say, we'll get to know what happens. And don't worry, we get to vote on it. And we know what we're voting on.